What is going on, everybody? Welcome back. It is Dog Talk with your host, Holden. Glad to have you guys here as we get going on another episode, as we get prepared for Missouri. Missouri coming to Athens this weekend. Big matchup. We've got a top 15 matchup. The biggest game of the season thus far for Georgia in this matchup. You know, early on into the season, let this music kind of calm down a little bit as we get going. Early on in the season, everybody wanted to talk about Georgia's schedule and how Georgia, just probably didn't have the best schedule. That schedule is going to end up being a problem for them later in the season, that strength of schedule. And all of a sudden, we look at the next three games that Georgia lines up against ranked opponents every single week. And unless a few things happen or go wrong for the teams that we have on tap, those teams are still going to be ranked when we play them. So all of a sudden, the back half of the schedule looks a lot better and much more favorable for the strength of schedule for Georgia. Biggest takeaway from this is Georgia's got to win them. Georgia's got to win these games. We talked about this last week after the Florida game. We knew that the college football playoff ranking was coming out, which we'll talk about in a minute. Knew that's coming. But coming out of that, it was you got to win. You got to win the games that you have coming up. I kind of blanked on what I was thinking of there for just a second. Maybe to come back to me here in just a minute. But in the meantime, you guys make sure you follow us on Twitter at DogTalk20, Instagram, same thing if you guys are watching on YouTube. Make sure you hit that like button. I'd greatly appreciate it. If you hadn't subscribed already, make sure you do that as well. I would appreciate it. But if I can try to remember what it was that I was thinking of just a second ago as I came into this. This is a good reason that you should keep notes and kind of have that set to the side. But I didn't have it set to the side. But anyways, maybe this will kind of bring me back to it. The strength of schedule at the start of the season, everybody wants to make the argument for, Georgia's not playing anybody this season. How in the world can they, be considered this good of a football team if they're not playing anybody? And then all of a sudden you get late into the season, and what happens? All of a sudden they're playing teams that are really good in the moment. I know that Auburn's not necessarily a good football team, but sometimes you don't play the greatest football game every single time. But like we said earlier in the season, champions find a way to win, and Georgia has been able to do that. That's the reason they're 8-0 so far in the season. And we've got some big matchups coming up here for the rest of the season. I'm looking forward to it. Nothing against the teams that we've played early into the season, UT Martin, Ball State, and all that. But this is when it really gets fun because you start to win these, or you start to play these games that are much bigger. And this is kind of what I was thinking about earlier, back half of this schedule getting tougher like this. You got to win them, because when you lose a game late into the season, there it is. When you lose a game late into the season like this, it's detrimental, to your college football playoff race. Whereas if you lose these games earlier in the season, maybe not so much. If you beat a UT Martin, Ball State, and then you lost to a South Carolina in week 3, that's early enough. I think Georgia has the opportunity to be able to bounce back from that. Now, the only thing that's going to kick you on that is how South Carolina performed through the entire season. That's where that strength of schedule does start to matter. And strength of record as far as the teams that you've played against. How have they looked throughout the season? How are they looking in the games they're playing against opponents that are similar or worse or better? How does that look for them? And then they look at you in the same way. And they do that either way, even when you're winning them all and haven't lost a game so far. So it really doesn't matter until you get late into the season like this. When you're only 3 games left, or really technically 4 weeks left in the season, and you lose a game late like this, it's very, very difficult to get back. It's very difficult, especially if you lose this game to a 7-1 Missouri team who, if they beat you, at that point, I think it's pretty much tied for the top of the East. There's still a couple of games that have to play out. But from my understanding, that would give Missouri the lead over the SEC East. You would still need to beat Ole Miss. You would still need to beat Tennessee. And let's see, Missouri still has Tennessee following us. And then they have Florida after that and round things out at Arkansas. So their season is not over. They still have 3 SEC games left. Luckily, following this, Georgia has Ole Miss that comes to us, and we go to Tennessee, and that rounds out the SEC. So both of these teams, Georgia and Missouri, have 2 games left really that matter a lot. I would say, like, for Missouri, well, I guess really it's 3 because you can't sleep on Florida. I think Georgia took care of business last week. But any given week, you can't sleep on a team that you're playing, and us having Ole Miss and Tennessee, we're definitely not sleeping on those two games. Not to rule out Georgia Tech and what they've done, but Georgia Tech just hasn't really been that rival team that you look for them to be. I don't want to sleep on that game when we come to it either, just because of the way that they've played this season and kind of upset a couple of teams in Miami and in Duke, and you see what those teams have fallen to now, but regardless, they still handle business when that matters. And Missouri has to continue to do the same thing also with a Tennessee, Florida, and Arkansas rounding out the season. So their season's not over until the very end. Their season's not over until we get to that November 25th game. But Georgia, if they can win this game, they have two SEC games to follow this. And I'm fairly certain if they beat Missouri and beat Ole Miss, I don't think, even if you somehow lost to Tennessee at the end of the year, don't want to bring that juju in here. But I think that at that point you would still clinch the SEC East because you've had enough wins and there's no chance that you can lose enough games by that point in the SEC for it to matter against that, and you would lock that up. So biggest thing here is we got to win this football game. Let's win this game that's in front of us, the Missouri game. We'll worry about the weeks coming after that when that time comes, but you got to win this football game this weekend, 3:30 SEC matchup on the CBS, as we all get. Gary Danielson, I know we're all so excited to get to hear his voice and him talk about Alabama the entire game that Georgia's playing. But regardless, it's going to be a huge matchup against 7-1 Missouri coming in 12th ranked in the initial college football playoff rankings. Georgia does fall down to the second ranked position there. And I tweeted this out as soon as it came out, that Georgia, yes, ranked number 2. And I'm sure Kirby's sitting there going, I'll take it. Not that you need the motivation, but it is motivation. That's all there is to it. And for as many people that want to say nobody's doubting Georgia, there sure are a lot of people that are doubting Georgia. There's a lot of people out there that they want to talk about, Brock Bowers isn't playing. How can they continue to win? Florida's going to upset them because they don't have Brock Bowers. And then you go and throttle Florida. And everybody goes, well, that wasn't really what we thought was going to happen. Georgia hadn't looked all that great in these other games. That's people doubting you. And the same people who are saying those things, well, yeah, they only beat Auburn by a touchdown, though, and they were down in that game, and they were down at halftime to South Carolina, even though they came roaring back. Those are the same people who are saying, nobody's doubting Georgia. Why are y'all saying this? Because of those things that you say right there. And for the same reason, the College Football Playoff Committee doesn't see Georgia as the number 1 team in the nation. They see them as the number 2 team in the nation. That's still really good. That's still really high. You're still in the College Football Playoff if you win out right there. But that's still a doubt. There's a doubt in there that you're the number 1 team in the country. Georgia wants to leave no doubt that they are the number 1 team in the country, and that's what they anticipate doing as the season rolls on. As we continue through these last few weeks of the season, Georgia's going to set out to prove that they are the number 1 team in the country and see if they can do something that hasn't been done in a really long time, has not been done within the last decade, hasn't been done within almost a century, it seems like. I guess we're close to that, not quite to that point, but a really, really long time. Definitely hasn't been done in the BCS era. Definitely hasn't been done in the college football playoff era at all. And I don't know that it's going to get any easier. I don't know that it's going to get tougher. I mean, a 12-team, playoff, I just really don't know. I think there's so much unknown about what's coming in the future to really have a gauge on how we feel that this is going to be easier or harder, more difficult, more easy. What exactly it is that's going to shape up here in the next couple of years. Also because of all of the changing of conferences. There's so much alive still and that we have to learn and that we're going to learn here in the years to come to where it's really interesting and there's a ton of questions to be answered. There's a ton of curiosities to be found. And I'm excited for that opportunity. But I want Georgia to take care of business this season. And right now, they're the number 2 team in the country, and I'm okay with it. I don't mind it, mainly because, again, it's motivation given that doesn't have to be given. I think these guys want to go out there and win regardless, but it makes you go, okay, we're the number 2 team in the country. That means they don't think we're number 1. Let's go prove it. Let's go show them we're the number 1 team in the country, even if it takes 4 weeks to get there. Because make no doubt, in 4 weeks, there's a game that's happening with the number 1 team in the country and the number 3 team in the country. One of them's got to fall. That has nothing to do with Georgia. One of them's got to fall, so something's going to change. We'll see what happens when that time comes. I'll make that prediction when that time comes. I've had this prediction really since the start of this season, but I digress. We'll save that for when that time comes. So, on tap for this one, we got Georgia. My sound's kind of crackling on me a little bit. We got Georgia. We got Missouri. 8-0, 7-1. Huge game going on in Athens. I'm excited for it. I know you guys are too. Let's kind of get to looking at some of this that we have coming up. We looked at this a little bit after the Florida game this past week. Georgia's offense and how explosive it's been here over the last couple of weeks. Really all season long. Carson Beck has looked really good. You see his numbers there on the screen if you guys are watching on YouTube. If you're not, make sure you go over and check it out. Carson Beck looks really good. I mean, 73% on the season, throw for almost 2,500 yards, right at 14. He's got 14 touchdowns, almost 15 touchdowns, 4 interceptions on the season. He looks really good. I saw earlier that NFL prospect or NFL scouts, they have been looking, saying, hey, he's playing high-caliber football. He's playing really, really good football right now and really kind of turning heads, which is good. I'm curious to see, is Carson going to try to come back one more season, or is this going to wrap it up for him? Let's see how the end of this season goes. That may determine all of that for him. But in this moment right now, he's looking really good, and if he can continue that trend, he's going to continue to look really good. Georgia's still 7th in the country as far as points per game goes at 40.5 coming into this, and then holding opponents to 14.8 is also 7th best in the country. Same that it was last week, both being at the 7th position. On the other side, though, Missouri is 27th in points offensively scored per game at 33.9, so about a touchdown behind what Georgia is right now, and then also giving up almost a touchdown, actually more than a touchdown, and they are 54th defensively, giving up points per game at 23.2. So that's kind of how those numbers line up, at least, and the difference in what Georgia's getting, what Georgia's giving, and what Missouri is giving and what Missouri is getting. Now, in this game last year, obviously, the past 11 minutes, let's see, really the past 5. Let me get my numbers pulled back up here. Yeah, Georgia, this is kind of crazy to me. The past 5 meetings, easily Georgia's gone that way, but Georgia is 11-1 in the 12 meetings that Missouri has had. I don't remember if that first meeting that they had, I don't remember if it wasn't the first, but I don't remember if Missouri beat Georgia in 2012 or 13 or how it was. I know there was a game that was really close, but I can't, to be honest with you, I just can't remember. And, but the last few times Georgia has played, it's been, let's go back to 2018, 43-29 Georgia, 27-0 in 19, 49-14 in 20, and then 43-6 in 2021 really made you seem like the team, the first team to go to the national championship game. It was like, man, Georgia's got Missouri's number, and then they kind of sleptwalk into that game last year in what I'm going to say that Hunter hates to hear, but if he's listening to this, he'll let me know. Como being up there in Columbia, Missouri, completely different matchup last season. This is one, I don't remember if I said this last week when we were coming off of that Florida game, but this is a game that I don't think people realize Missouri is going to have circled for sure, because it's a game that ends 26-22 on a Georgia comeback. But I think this is something that everybody needs to understand as well, is it's not just Missouri who is circling this game. Georgia is circling it as well. I think they realized they sleptwalked into that game, the guys who played last year. They sleptwalked as they walked into that game, and Missouri did not. Missouri came prepared for that game, ready for that game, and excited for it. And the other side of that is Georgia didn't. They walked right into it. And Missouri was there to play, and they did, and almost beat them. Georgia kind of kicked themselves in the foot on the way to it, but Missouri made no mistake. They played a really good football game last year in this matchup, and I anticipate a lot of the same thing. I think this is a much better football team than it was last year, and they were a good enough team to hang around with us. The good thing is this is in Georgia. It's at 3:30, so I'll give credit at least to Missouri on that, but nonetheless, Georgia's going to be ready for this football game, but so is Missouri. Missouri knows what last year was. Georgia knows what last year was. It's a new year, new teams, But you got to match up and you got to play it. And I think this is going to be a lot closer game than I think most people think it is. I know I've got a score prediction on it that we're going to get to here in just a minute, but I think this game's a lot closer than most do. I've seen a few people kind of put out some numbers that has Georgia like 45-10 in this game. I really, really would be surprised if this is a game that Georgia runs away with. I'll say this every week that this happens is I'll be excited with it. Trust me, if we're sitting here 45-10 in the fourth quarter, I'm going to be fired up if Georgia's putting it on Missouri like that, because, again, it's just that proving factor. It's showing you, hey, you guys can feel like we're not the number one team in the country, but we're here to prove that we are. And they're going to do that for the next 4 weeks. And we're going to see how things go. But, again, make no doubt, Missouri's coming in this game ready. So is Georgia. So far, the averages here on the screen that I have for you guys this is the averages. It's not what, obviously, everybody's playing in this game, but this is averaging what Georgia and Missouri have yardage-wise on the season. 506 is what Georgia offensively averages in a game. 335 yards of that is through the air, and 172 yards of that is on the ground. And then on the other side of the ball, Missouri, they're averaging about 443 total yards a game, right at 295 through the air, 150 on the ground. So really close as far as the rush game goes for this. The question to me is going to be, can Missouri run the football? They have good running backs over there. One of their main ones, Cody Schrader there, 140 rushes, 807 yards on the season with 9 touchdowns. And they go through the air pretty decently, almost 300 yards. Again, Brady Cook looks a lot better this season than he has in years last year. I mean, he didn't necessarily look bad last year, but he has also made a difference in this football game. But then we have to look on our side of the ball. We've got to look, and we've got Carson Beck. We've got DeJon Edwards, who is coming into his own. In some of the injury updates, Brock Bowers not back. Dan Jackson not back. I think we got Tyron Ingram Dawkins back last week against Florida. He made an immediate impact. We may get Amarius Mims back this week. That'd be exciting for the O-line, which has been improving and getting better every week with the guys that we've had, even without Amarius. So that's an exciting thing to have happen. And then obviously having a Lab McConkey as healthy as he's been, that's huge. And one of the biggest things offensively for Georgia is Carson Beck has a lot of guys to throw to. For everybody who was making the argument that, oh, man, Brock Bowers not being there, that's going to hurt Georgia. Actually, I'm not going to say that not having Brock helps, but it opened up the offense to where I've heard this in the past where Kirby has said, and I think maybe even some of the coordinators have said this, is, you kind of scheme your offense or your defense around your best and key players, your strongest points of your offense. You're scheming things around that. And if Brock Bowers was that guy and everything is schemed around it, you're going to find a way to get him the ball, no matter what it takes, whether we're trying to get a matchup here, there, whatever it is. You're going to find a way to get him the ball. Well, when he's not on the field, all of a sudden, not that much attention is paid to him, or in a 12 personnel situation, to where everybody all of a sudden goes, wait a minute. When Brock Bowers is on the field, we know who we have to protect, and we kind of get beat on some of these other guys with him not on the field. Now what do we do? Because now they've got an entire plethora of wideouts who are going to catch it. By the way, again, we talked about this last week, and Oscar Delp, who looks a whole lot like Brock Bowers. He obviously not quite that same guy yet, but looks a lot like him. He's bigger than he is, and he's able to make some plays by himself too, and which is really exciting. But then on defense for Missouri, you have to really sit back and go, man, we have to protect the entire field, which you have to do that in every game anyways. But not having Brock Bowers on the field where you might have to put 2 guys on him, it opens up for them to be allowed to kind of sit back and see. But when you sit back, we're going to run it right down your throat. So it's just the effect of how do you defend a Georgia team who is offensively doing pretty much anything and everything that they want to do at this point. And I'm glad I don't have to be the one who necessarily has to give an answer to that. I'm sorry, I'm trying to get my second thing popped up right here. Just bear with me, you guys that are on YouTube here. Oh, okay, there we go. Sorry, I've got like 46 buttons clicked here. There we go. Anyways, I did want to look over at some of the stats for Missouri and Brady Cook. Brady Cook, not too bad on the season so far. Right at 2,300 yards, almost 70%. He's thrown for 15 touchdowns, and he has also thrown for 3 interceptions on the season. So one thing to kind of remember, and the comparisons here is Carson Beck is putting up 2,000. He's at 2,500 yards, just a few yards better than him, a couple hundred yards. But Carson Beck is a little bit more accurate. He's almost 4% more accurate than Brady Cook is. Has thrown one more interception and one less touchdown, but, has really spread the ball out really, really effectively. Whereas Brady Cook, his main guy is Luther Burden. Luther Burden's got 61 receptions, 905 total yards on the season, and 6 touchdowns. And again, Georgia and Carson Beck offensively has been able to spread the ball out to a lot. So for me, defensively, it's like, okay, pretty simple. Get on Cody Schrader, stop the run game. Everybody look out for Luther Burden because he's going to make plays. Affect Brady Cook, then what do they do to you? All of a sudden, it's like, okay, that's how you lock down Missouri's offense. Now let's see how they try to lock down Georgia's offense, because, again, Carson Beck, really effective right now. He's seeing the ball really well. Still got to get his eyes downfield at times, but for the most part, he's making really good, smart plays. He's hitting checkdowns when he needs to. Trying to, for me, I think it's just let that progression last a little longer if you're not being pressured in the pocket. Obviously, if you get pressured, you can't look back across the field and see a guy who's wide open 30 yards down the field if that pressure is coming in your face. But it's when he has the time, that's when we kind of want to see that happen. But the comparisons really lean Carson Beck's way. Even though Brady Cook has one more touchdown and one less interception, Carson's got the yardage and he has the percentage on Brady Cook. And again, plethora of wideouts. You got Marcus Rosemary-Jack Saint. You got Dominique Lovett. You got Ra Thomas. You got Lab McConkey, again, back. Oscar Delp that you get down there. Pierce Spurlin when he comes in. Trying to think. I know there's more than that, and I'm just kind of blanking on some of the guys right now. Arian Smith, I'd love to see him get wide open out there and just take off running and catch the football. So you've got plenty of guys that are there that can make plays for you. Offensively for Georgia, which is an exciting thing. Then defensively, we just have to lock down those few things. Again, affecting Brady Cook, I think, is a big part of this. Getting in his face, wreaking that havoc, making him make mistakes. And then, obviously, covering Luther Burden, I think, is going to be a big part of this. And then you stop the run game of Cody Schrader, which Georgia has done a very good job of that throughout the season. Again, let's see what defensively the yardage has been for Georgia. Stopping the run, I think Georgia's been pretty good defensively stopping the run. Let's see. Yeah, less than 100 yards a game is what Georgia's given up, averaging 93.6 yards per game on defense and only 178 through the air. So Georgia's defense is only allowing 272 total yards for any opponent that they're playing, which is really good. And, again, you're under that 100-yard mark. I think you're going to be okay defensively against this team, which I'm excited about. I think Georgia has a really good opportunity to win this game and look really good. I'm glad we get to do it in front of a home base, but I don't want to take away from the fact that I still think this is going to be a really good football game, and a game I don't think we just get to cakewalk through. I don't think Georgia's going to sleepwalk into it. I'd love to see Georgia absolutely throttle them here, but I just don't think this is a game that Georgia just runs away with simply and easily. But we're going to see. There's a reason they're ranked 12th in the country. That's what the College Football Playoff believes that they are. Let's see if they put up that fight. I expect them to do that, but I think Georgia's also going to make some pretty good plays because Georgia, as the season has gone on, week by week, game by game, is getting better and better and better. So are these other teams. But when Georgia starts to get better and better and better, everybody starts to look and they go, man, that's a tough football team to try to go play right there. I don't want anything to do with them. And that's what Kirby wants to instill in other teams. He wants to instill that in his team, to instill that in other players that they are against. Like, man, I don't want to have to play that dude. That dude's tough. I'm scared to go play Georgia because of what they are. That's what Kirby wants to instill in the teams that have to play them. And when you get on the field against them, they want to push that up against you and make you go, whoa. Yeah, I don't want to have to play this football team. That's a really hard team to play right there. So let's look at what we've got for the keys to the game. And kind of like Alyssa Lang, her little spoof from, what was that? SEC Nation. I don't remember what it was. Yeah, I guess she's just on the SEC network. That was pretty funny to me. If you guys hadn't seen it, I'll try to retweet it over there on Twitter at DogTalk20, and you guys can go over and you can check out the video there where she kind of does like a spoof on the if you've been injured, call this number for help. But anyways, to the keys of the game. Offensively, this is what we got. We got to protect the football. I think this is going to just kind of be one of those keys to the game every week because the turnover margin does lean Missouri's way pretty heavily. Interceptions is almost the same. We're at like 0.6 per game. They're at like 0.5. But total, we're at 1.1 our turnovers offensively per game, and they're at like 0.6 or 0.7, I think. So not quite a turnover a game, whereas we're over that margin. And then defensively, last week helped a lot, but I'd love to see us continuing to get those turnovers as well. Right now we're averaging 1.3 is what we're showing on that, and all of that pretty much is coming through the air, getting interceptions, 1.1, 0.1 on the fumble, and I think that happened last week. That's kind of where that number kind of jumped up. But offensively, keys to the game, we got to protect the football. Cannot have turnovers in a game like this. You got away with it on the road at Auburn. You get away with it in a couple of the other games that you have against South Carolina at home. But you're at home. It's a good thing. But you're playing a much, much better and improved football team that's going to be across from you in Missouri. This is a team that I think if you turn the ball over 2 times and you're not getting turnovers, you get beat in this football game. So we have to protect the football. That means Carson Beck being smart like he's been this season, paying attention to what he's doing, and you're going to have to throw it in the tight pockets, but when you get rattled, throw it away. Throw it away or take the sack. Don't throw an interception. Can't make stupid mistakes. So we got to protect the football. Converting these third downs, we've been very good at this season, and we have to continue that. We didn't do as good against Florida last week, but we got to convert these first downs or these third downs and extending the drives. Extending the drives is such a big part of this, and when you extend, we've got to get points out of it. Touchdowns preferable, obviously, but if it comes down to field goals, put them up. We need the points. You got to have the points. We saw what Mevis, whatever his name is there for Missouri did last year, the kicker. Dude kicked every single field goal that he had to kick to try to get his team to win, and his team had the game nearing the end of it because of his leg, because he kicked so many field goals in that game last year and kept his team alive, kept his team in the lead. Georgia, in the same way, has to do that this week. If we can't get touchdowns, we have to extend drives and at least get field goals out of it. We got to put points on the board. And if all we're doing is kicking field goals like 2015 in this game, it's going to be troublesome. We got to score touchdowns in this game. And then that leads me to my last point, though. Key of the game here offensively, lean on them. Lean on them. What do I mean by that? I mean offensive line, just lean on those dudes to where by the end of the game, we're running the ball all over that defense. And I think Georgia can do that. I expect Georgia to do that. I expect us to throw the ball and be effective at that, converting those third downs, like I say, but lean on them to where at the beginning we might not be able to get much running game going. I don't know. We might come in there and run right over them to start. But if we're not, lean on them, lean on them, lean on them. Exert your will, and eventually they will break, and you will find wide open running routes. And when that happens, it also starts to open up that play action as well. Now let's jump over to defense. We got to affect the quarterback. Got to get in Brady Cook's face, like I was talking about there just a minute ago. Make him make mistakes. Make him make mistakes. Whether it's having to throw the ball away, that's not necessarily a mistake, but that's a blown down basically. That's a wasted drive. Stopping those drives, doing like we've been doing on third downs, getting off the field on third downs is important in this. And I think by affecting him, you can do that. Don't allow him to try to kill you with his legs. I don't think he's a huge runner, but that doesn't mean he won't. Then in that same way, we have to have that elite secondary. We've got to be able to cover Luther Burton. We've got to be able to cover the other guys they're going to try to throw to when Burton is covered. So got to be elite in the secondary, and we've done a good job of that this season, but continuing that. Winning the turnover margin is the final thing. So, again, I don't think if you turn the ball over 2 times in this game and you're not getting a turnover, I think it's going to be very, very difficult to win this football game. So we got to win the turnover margin. If we do turn it over once or twice, we got to get it once or twice, if not 3 times if that happens. And if you got a game where there's 5 turnovers and both teams have had multiple, well, this is probably a lower scoring game than it seems like. So, but that's what we got. Offensively, protect the ball, converting third downs, and lean on them. And then defensively, affect the quarterback, be elite in the secondary, and win that turnover margin. And I think that if you do all of those things, again, I've got this a lot closer. This line opened at like 16. When I looked at it earlier today, it's still like, I think it's 15 now. Over under on it's like 55.5. But this is what I got on the pick. I don't think it's going to be what most people would say. Don't think it's what most people think it's going to be. I got a Georgia 37, Missouri 31. I'm hoping Georgia's defense doesn't give up this many points. I would be pretty surprised if they do. I could see this game. I almost went 37-27, like a 10-point game. I feel like that's pretty comfortable. But I think this is going to be a tight game. I think it's tight for a little while. I feel like in the fourth quarter, Georgia kind of pulls away with it at one point, maybe makes it like a 37-24 kind of game. And I could see it finaling right there too, but I could see this like a 37-24, and then all of a sudden, kind of the same thing as last week, just a later score in this game, and Missouri kind of pulls in within a touchdown, but it's enough that Georgia can run the clock out at the end to win this game 37-31. I'd love for this game to be a lot higher scoring on Georgia's part and for them to really take care of Missouri and this not be that close of a game, but I feel like this is going to be a dogfight till the very end. I don't think this is a game that Georgia just walks away with. I'm just going to give you my honest opinion on that. Hopefully I'm wrong. Hopefully they do. Hopefully this is 45-17 as a final. That'd be great to look at and really look at the committee and say, okay, we're here. What you want us to do? That's number 12 team in the country. Now let's go play what more than likely would be a top 10 ranked team in Ole Miss. Who they got next week? They got Texas A&M this week. Should win that game. Should. They lose it, all of a sudden it kind of changes that strength of schedule, doesn't it? But if they win that football game, all of a sudden you probably got a 10th ranked team, if not better than that. I think they're ranked 10th right now. So they're ranked 10th. So should still be that, if not better, depending on what happens in the top 10 this week. So another huge matchup that's coming to Athens next week as well. Liable to be a game day kind of situation because there's some big games this weekend, but that could line up to be a pretty good one too. One of the other things that I want to mention as we kind of come off of, or at least before we kind of start looking at some of these other games that are going to be going on around the country as well. Another reason I think this game is going to be tighter than most, and this is something I don't think a lot of people take into account when it comes to this. Georgia had a bye week before they played Florida. Big game. Georgia came. They were ready, prepared for that game against Florida, had all the answers, throttled Florida, was ready. But anytime you play a big game like that, especially a rivalry game, man, it's hard football. It's beat you up football. I want to take you down. I want to be as physical as I can against you and beat you and in any way that I can. I want to break your will in this game. And both sides are doing that as best as they can. Some teams get the better of them. Some teams don't. Some players against other players do get the better of them, even if it's not the team that wins this game. So we're pretty healthy in this aspect coming into it, but you're coming off a really hard game against a strong rival that we did play. Missouri, on the other hand, played South Carolina during our bye week, and they had the bye week last week. This is why I think this game could be closer because Missouri has had an entire week after playing South Carolina. They've had the entire week to kind of get healthy. They've had an entire week to rest, not 100% rest, but you know what I mean, rest, watch film, prepare in every single aspect of this way and this game that they possibly can to be ready for it. You've got 2 weeks worth of film that you get to watch on Georgia during that time. I'm sure even before then they've looked at it and they've kind of been game planning, trying to figure out what's going on with Georgia. Not saying that they sent a staffer to a Georgia football game to watch it and film it and get some signs or anything like that, but they're going to be prepared for this game, and they're coming off of a bye. I think if this was a game where they're coming off of having to play at Kentucky like they did a few weeks ago, maybe different. I might feel that Georgia does have a little bit more favoritism than a 6-point final at 37-31. I could push that further and probably see that 15-point line closer. And it could still do that regardless, but I feel like Missouri coming off of a bye and Georgia coming off of having to play in the world's largest outdoor cocktail party in Jacksonville leads itself for Missouri to be a little bit more ready for this game. Not than we anticipate because, again, I think they're going to be, but they're coming in fresh. That's all there is to it. You're coming a very fresh football team that is coming in off a 2 weeks break who is ready to play football again. Probably was antsy last week not playing, enjoyed getting to have the break, but they're coming in against one of the best teams in the country, and this could be a huge, huge win for Missouri. So you're going to get your best shot, even if you're not the number one team in the country. You're about to get everything you possibly want out of a Missouri team who's coming to town. And Georgia, no doubt in my mind, is going to be ready. But we got to be more ready than we anticipate being ready. Our fans got to be loud. Even if the game doesn't look like it should, we still got to be loud. We have to affect what's going on that Missouri sideline. We have to affect the crowd noise. We've got to make a difference. And Kirby calls for that generally every week. But I think that matters, getting those false starts, accounting for a few penalties because you're a loud atmosphere at 3:30. I think that's really going to matter in this game. And any kind of help that a fan base can give a team, hey, all the more better right there. But that's what I've got on. That's what I've got for the preview of it. So let's kind of look at some of the other big games that are going on around the country. We've got some games that have already gone final earlier in this week. I think like every day until sometime in November, there's a game playing, maybe even December or January. I don't remember. There's some kind of a game that's being played. So you've had a couple of them already. I saw this Toledo-Buffalo game in the snow. Northern Illinois, Central Michigan in the snow. And how about that situation at Central Michigan where they had some staffer on the sideline, didn't know who he was, dressed in all of their gear and everything? Kind of curious, isn't it? South Alabama and Troy are playing right now. TCU, Texas Tech's playing. Last I looked, Wake Forest and Duke were playing, and Wake Forest was up 7-0. I mean, if Duke takes another loss right here, is it really just because it's like, all right, basketball season's here, baby, let's get on to that? I don't know, but, I mean, they took a fall from grace pretty heavily. But some of the big games that are going on this weekend that we're going to kind of take a look at. We got Texas A&M. I'm going to start at the 12 p.m. slot and kind of slide down to the later games. You got Texas A&M at number 11, Ole Miss. Number 3, Ohio State, which technically is number 1. I don't know why it says number 3. Number 1 team in the country now being Ohio State is at Rutgers. Number 12, Notre Dame at Clemson. Clemson's not a big favorite in that game. Notre Dame's not a big favorite in that game, which I'm surprised by, but we'll talk about that in a minute. Top 25 matchup. Number 25, it's not number 25. Why do these keep saying they don't have the updated rankings on my page? Kansas State, I think, is 23rd. Yeah, 23. Number 23, Kansas State at number 7, Texas at 12 o'clock. Arizona State, Utah, could be a good one. Army and Air Force. Air Force being a ranked team. You got Penn State at Maryland, not one to sleep on. Virginia Tech at Louisville, not one to sleep on. Oklahoma State, that is a big one. That's a top 25 matchup as well. Bedlam, and I guess this is the final Bedlam that's going to happen. That's at 3 o'clock. I would give you the ranking, but it doesn't say it correctly on my page here, so I'm just not going to do that. FSU at Pitt. Don't sleep on that one either. Cal at Oregon. Don't think Cal's going to give Oregon a run like they did against USC. I expect Oregon to run away with that one. Kansas at Iowa State. You got a top 25 matchup here, too, and number 5, Washington at number 22. Is that what they are, USC? Didn't they bump them up a little bit more? I don't know, but that's a big one. I think Washington's liable to go to Southern Cal and just slap the snot at them, to be honest with you. I could see that like 52-20. Washington just running all over USC, but I digress. LSU at Alabama, that's a big one at 7:45. It says 7 on here, but look back on ESPN, that's 7:45. That's the latest game I've seen an SEC kick like that, especially like at an SEC venue, not a neutral site game or anything like that. So that's a late one. Oregon State, Colorado, UCLA at Arizona. Don't sleep on that one. Arizona's a pretty sneaky good football team this year. So that's some of the other big games that are going on around the country. You got Auburn Vandy, too. Don't forget about that one. Let's look at some of the picks on the week. This is what I've got here. I got number 2, Georgia, over number 12, Missouri. It's the first pick. Then give me Notre Dame over Clemson. And Notre Dame's only a 3-point favorite. Give me those points, -3 for Notre Dame. So that's 3 picks so far. I got Auburn over Vandy. Again, you got to have some of the easier picks, but Auburn's not a huge favorite on the road at Vandy right here. This is a game that if Auburn drops, it really makes you just kind of scratch your head and go, man, They need a serious program turnaround if you're losing to Vandy like Florida did last year. But I digress. Anyways, we move on. Texas A&M traveling to Ole Miss. Big game here as well. I just don't think Texas A&M is very good. And it's still pretty surprising to me that Ole Miss is only a 3-point favorite in this. It makes me a little bit nervous because Usually when Vegas is putting these lines out and they're this close, there's usually a reason, and they usually get pretty doggone close to it. But I kind of expect Ole Miss to kind of take care of business at home in this one. So give me Ole Miss and minus those 3. So on the week, I'm going to go with 6 total picks. Georgia over Mizzou, Notre Dame over Clemson minus 3, Auburn over Vandy, Ole Miss over Texas A&M minus 3. Last week went 3-1. Thought I would break the record. Not the record, but I'd break that 500 point and get back above it. But I don't. 21, 22, and 1 on the season. Not the best season, but that's okay. We take what we can, and I think usually that's like a half a loss a piece on one of the pushes, so it's like 21.5 and 22.5. So we'll see if we can't turn things around and try to get better at our picks. Anyways, but that's what I got on it. That's what I got on the preview, for the Georgia Mizzou game. I know I'm looking forward to it, much like you guys are. We've got a loaded end of the season coming right our way right here. I'm excited for it. Looking forward to seeing what Georgia can do in this matchup against Missouri. Top 25 matchup that's going on, top 15 matchup that's going on in Athens at 3:30 on CBS. I'll check in with you guys after Georgia, Missouri this weekend. Go Dogs.